Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive. This time, we're going to be looking at something pretty interesting. The question of how you can apply, well, you,
Yeah.
broadly, integrated marketing strategies
Uh-huh.
to a local church. Now, we're going to be using a guide from Optimizely for this. They're a digital experience platform. The guide's called Integrated Marketing, 10 Steps to Build Your Strategy. But there's a bit of an odd challenge here, right? Churches aren't really known for being like super savvy marketers, so I'm really curious to see how these concepts can be adapted for that kind of context.
Yeah, it is a little bit of a head scratcher at first. I mean, we tend to think of marketing as something businesses do to,
Yeah,
bring in more money. But the underlying principles can actually be really useful for all sorts of organizations, even ones with totally different goals.
exactly. Like right off the bat, churches aren't driven by profit. So what does a win even look like for them? What are they aiming for?
That's the perfect place to start. Optimizely actually talks about setting what they call SMART goals. That's specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. So for a church, a win could be something like increasing how much the community is engaged, helping their members grow spiritually, or expanding their outreach programs. Like, picture this. A church sets a goal to get 20% more volunteers involved in their community meal program, and they want to do it within the next 6 months. That's something they can measure, it's realistic, and it's directly tied to their mission of helping people.
That's a really clear example. Now, another big thing in marketing is knowing who you're talking to. Optimizely calls them buyer personas. But churches don't exactly have buyers in the traditional sense, right? So how do they define their audience? Is it just the people who already go there?
It can be, but it's often much wider than that. They might want to reach out to families in the neighborhood, people looking for some kind of spiritual guidance, or even folks who just want sense of community. Heck, they might even want to reach folks who've never even thought about going to church before.
So it's kind of like how businesses would segment their customers, right? You got to figure out what different groups of people need and what they care about.
Exactly. And Optimizely is big on this idea that your message needs to resonate with the people you're trying to reach.
I mean,
Well, for a church, that could mean tailoring how they communicate to address the specific concerns and hopes of different folks.
give me an example.
Sure. Like they might focus on messages of hope and resilience if they're talking to people who are going through tough times. Or they might highlight their community outreach programs if they're trying to attract people who want to make a difference.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, something that really caught my eye in this Optimizely guide was how much they stressed team alignment and having shared values. Like, even before you start crafting your message, they even give examples of company values as part of building a solid marketing foundation. This seems extra important for a church, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. You got to remember, churches are made up of all sorts of people, and each person brings their own beliefs and interpretations to the table, even if they're all part of the same faith. So getting everyone on the same page about the church's mission, its values,
Yeah.
what it's trying to achieve, that's absolutely crucial.
So it's like presenting the united front. So their message is crystal clear, everyone's saying the same thing.
That's it. And Optimizely goes on about transparency and working together. Imagine if everyone in a church, the staff, the volunteers, even the people in the congregation, they're all on the same page. Everyone understands the goals.
What happens then?
Well, for one thing, you avoid a lot of internal conflict. Everyone's pulling in the same direction, and that makes their efforts to reach out to the community way more effective.
This is getting really interesting. So having a clear vision and shared values, it's just as important for a church as it is for any business.
You got it. And speaking of business, there's this one concept from the Optimizely guide that might surprise you when we apply it to a church. Competitor analysis.
Competitor analysis for a church.
Now, hear me out. When we talk about competitor analysis for a church, we're not talking about trying to be better than other churches or stealing their members or anything like that.
Yeah, that'd be pretty unchurch-like, wouldn't it?
Exactly. It's more about understanding what the community needs. What are other organizations already doing well? And where are there gaps that the church could fill?
So instead of seeing other churches as competition, they could be seen as partners and serving the community.
Exactly. It's about collaboration, not competition. Like, let's say there's a need for after-school programs for teenagers in the community. If the YMCA is already running a great program, maybe the church could focus on something different, like supporting senior citizens or organizing a community garden.
Makes sense. It's about recognizing that different organizations have different strengths.
Right, and that includes other churches. They can all contribute to the community in unique ways. And, this kind of analysis can actually lead to some really cool partnerships. Churches can work together to meet the needs of the community.
Now, speaking of challenges, one thing churches often struggle with is limited resources. They don't have the same kind of budget as big corporations for fancy marketing campaigns. So how does the Optimizely guide deal with that?
That's a great point. And Optimizely does offer some practical advice for organizations working with tight budgets. They talk a lot about what they call content scalability, basically making the most of the resources you already have.
Content scalability, huh? I get how that's important for businesses. But how does that work for a church? I mean, they have limited resources, and they're trying to share a pretty unique message.
Well, think about it this way. Most churches have a weekly sermon, right? That sermon is full of valuable insights and teachings. They could turn that sermon into shorter clips for social media, blog posts for their website, or even use it to inspire community events.
So instead of always starting from scratch, they're finding ways to make the most of what they've already got.
Exactly. And Optimizely also recommends things like creating repeatable workflows, using templates, and having a central content hub where everyone involved in communication can access and share resources.
Ah, the content hub. So we're not talking about some super complicated high-tech system here, are we?
Not at all. For a church, it could be as simple as a shared Google Drive folder where staff and volunteers can work on things together, like bulletins, social media posts, even scripts for video announcements. The point is to have a system that streamlines their efforts and makes it easy to use content across different channels.
So it's about working smarter, not harder, especially when resources are tight.
You got it. And speaking of leverage in technology, let's talk about something that's been making waves in the marketing world lately. Artificial intelligence, or AI.
AI in the church. That's not a combination I ever would have thought of. What does Optimizely say about that?
Well, they acknowledge that AI is playing a bigger and bigger role in marketing, and they recommend using it strategically, but not relying on it blindly.
So we're not talking about replacing pastors with robots just yet.
Not quite. But AI could be really helpful for some of those time-consuming or repetitive tasks, which would free up church staff and volunteers to focus on building relationships and serving the community.
That sounds pretty helpful, actually. Can you give us an example, like how could a church actually use AI?
Sure. AI could be used to personalize communication with members, like sending them reminders about events they might be interested in, or offering them resources that are relevant to their needs.
So instead of sending out a generic email to everyone, they can use AI to target their messages and make them more meaningful.
Exactly. AI could also be used to analyze community data, helping the church identify groups that are being underserved, or areas where their outreach could have the biggest impact. Imagine being able to pinpoint the neighborhoods where families are struggling to find affordable childcare, or where seniors are feeling isolated. That kind of information could be incredibly valuable for a church, especially one that wants to make a real difference.
That's some powerful stuff. But I imagine there are some ethical considerations with all this AI stuff, too.
For sure. It's really important for churches to use AI in a way that's aligned with their values, and they got to make sure it doesn't create a sense of distance or replace genuine human connection.
So it's about finding the right balance, using technology to enhance their efforts, but never losing sight of the human element.
Exactly. And that brings us to another important idea from the Optimizely guide, the concept of touch points, and how every interaction, no matter how small, can contribute to a church's overall impact.
Okay, touch points. Optimizely says every interaction counts. But churches don't have customers in the same way a business does. So I'm curious how this idea applies to them.
That's what makes it so interesting. If we think of a touch point as any interaction someone has with the church, it opens up a whole new world of possibilities. It goes way beyond just attendance services.
So we're looking beyond the walls of the church building itself.
Precisely. A touch point could be something as simple as a friendly greeting from a church member at a community event, or a volunteer handing out water bottles at a marathon. It's about making people feel seen and welcomed, even in unexpected places.
I love that. It's like taking the spirit of the church out into the community.
Exactly. And those little gestures can make a big difference. They create a sense of connection and goodwill that can grow into something much deeper over time.
So even something like a community garden run by the church, that could be a touch point.
Absolutely. Or think about the church's online presence, their website, their social media pages, even their online directory. These can all be touch points, creating a sense of community and belonging, even before someone actually sets foot in the church building.
This is making me realize how many opportunities churches have to connect with people. It's not just about Sunday services or official events.
You got it. And that's where integrated marketing comes full circle. It's about making sure all these touch points, online and offline, are working together. They all need to be aligned with the church's mission and values. They should create a consistent experience that reflects what the church believes in.
So it's not just about having a flashy website or a catchy slogan. It's about living out their values in every interaction.
That's the key. Integrated marketing for a church means weaving their values into everything they do, so it feels genuine and authentic. Think of it like a tapestry, each touch point. The community garden, the online sermon, it all contributes to the overall picture of who they are and what they stand for.
That's a beautiful analogy. It's about creating a cohesive experience, something meaningful for everyone who comes into contact with the church.
Well said, and that's what makes this so powerful. By using this integrated marketing approach, churches can really amplify their impact and create a ripple effect of positive change in their communities.
This deep dive has been eye-opening. We started with a guide meant for businesses, and we found a ton of valuable insights that can be applied to something as unique as a local church.
It just goes to show you, sometimes the best knowledge comes from the most unexpected places.
For sure. And that's what we love to do here on the Deep Dive. Explore new perspectives and help you connect the dots in new ways.
So as you go about your day, we encourage you to think about this. If every interaction counts, what are some of the unexpected ways your local church is making an impact? And how could this new perspective help them connect more deeply with their community?
That's definitely something to think about. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time for another fascinating exploration.